The mission begins. In the quiet depths of space, Nerexion moved through the vast void like a shadow, concealed in the silence of the stars. She was an elite assassin, one of the most feared operatives from the Varan Empire. Raised from childhood within the Empire's clandestine training camps, she had been shaped into a perfect weapon, unwavering, sharp, and utterly loyal to her mission. Her task was simple: eliminate anyone who posed a threat to the Varan Empire's supremacy. And her current target was no small one. He was a human scientist named Dr. Eli Stone, a brilliant mind whose research had captured the attention of powerful figures across the galaxy. Dr. Stone's work on quantum hyperfields and interdimensional folding had the potential to revolutionize space travel, collapsing vast distances in the universe and making instant travel between distant star systems possible. But such knowledge could also destabilize the galaxy, shifting the balance of power that the Varan Empire had fought so hard to maintain. Nara's orders were absolute: neutralize the scientist before his discovery could reach the wrong hands. As her sleek, dark ship approached the asteroid colony where Dr. Stone had set up his research, she adjusted her controls, locking onto his location. The colony was remote, hidden in the shadow of an enormous gas giant, and had been selected for its seclusion. Dr. Stone's operations were lightly guarded, relying more on secrecy than heavy security. Nara's fingers hovered over the weapon controls, her mind focusing on the approach, planning her strike with precision. In just a few moments, her mission would be over, and she would return to her quiet, isolated life, a life of purpose, but little satisfaction. But as she drew closer, something unexpected flashed across her radar. A second ship was closing in on the colony, one not associated with Dr. Stone's research or the Varan Empire. The vessel was small and agile, appearing like a blur against the darkness. Nara's instincts flared. She altered her approach, moving into a shadowed position to avoid detection, her gaze never leaving the approaching ship. She tapped into the console, scanning for identification, but the ship's signals were scrambled, leaving its origin a mystery. Nara watched as the unknown ship came to a sudden halt, then released an energy blast aimed directly at Dr. Stone's colony. The shockwave rippled through the asteroid field, causing debris to scatter. The scientist's colony was under siege, and it wasn't her doing. For the first time, Nara felt a twinge of uncertainty, something she hadn't experienced in years. She had been sent to eliminate Dr. Stone, but now there was a new player, and their intentions were unknown. Quickly, Nara adjusted her tactics, deciding to land on the asteroid's surface rather than engage in an aerial assault. Her ship's landing gear extended as she touched down on the rocky terrain, close enough to the research colony to survey the situation but still concealed. Exiting her ship, she activated her cloaking suit, her form blending seamlessly with the gray and black landscape. The silence was punctuated only by the distant explosions and hissing of air escaping the ruptured holes of Dr. Stone's facility. She moved swiftly, navigating the rocky terrain toward the research outpost, her senses heightened, every movement calculated. As she neared the colony's perimeter, Nara spotted Dr. Stone. He was struggling with a group of guards, trying to secure his most valuable equipment as fire tore through the facility. Even from a distance, Nara could sense his desperation. This was his life's work, and he was ready to protect it with everything he had. She paused, watching as Dr. Stone shouted orders to his guards, directing them to defend specific chambers within the research center. There was something compelling about him, a fierce determination and intelligence that radiated even in the midst of chaos. But she had a mission, and hesitation wasn't part of her training. Nara raised her weapon, steadying her aim on Dr. Stone. One shot, and her mission would be complete. But before she could pull the trigger, the unknown ship attacked again, sending another wave of energy toward the colony. The blast sent shockwaves through the asteroid's surface, destabilizing the ground beneath her. Nara lost her footing, stumbling as the earth cracked open, creating a chasm between her and Dr. Stone. In that split second, her decision changed. She wasn't entirely sure why, But the scientist's fight to save his work resonated with her in a way she couldn't explain. Instead of finishing her mission, Nera sprinted toward Dr. Stone, shouting over the noise of the destruction, "Come with me if you want to live." Dr. Stone looked at her in shock but didn't hesitate. He dashed toward her, clutching a small device tightly against his chest. The ground trembled beneath them as the facility's structure continued to collapse. She led him through the wreckage, weaving between fallen beams and shattered walls, her training taking over as she guided them towards safety. They reached the outer perimeter of the colony just as the unknown ship swooped low, its cannons targeting the remaining guards. Dr. Stone glanced at Nera, a question in his eyes as he saw her unmarked, unfamiliar suit. "Who are you?" he demanded, breathing heavily. She hesitated. "Not your enemy. Let's leave it at that," she replied curtly, pulling him toward the temporary safety of a nearby ridge. They managed to evade the attack long enough to reach her ship, hidden in a rocky alcove. Nera quickly activated the ship's entry codes, and the hatch opened. She motioned for Dr. Stone to climb inside, and he complied without question, clearly aware that his life depended on it. Once inside, Nera initiated the ship's launch sequence, propelling them away from the asteroid with a surge of energy. The unknown vessel detected their movement, immediately redirecting its attention to follow them. Nera's fingers flew across the controls, maneuvering her ship through the asteroid field with precision honed from years of training. Dr. Stone held onto his device as if it were his lifeline, casting anxious glances out the cockpit window. "Who were they?" he asked, his voice tense. "Unknown," Nera replied, focusing on their escape route. "But clearly someone wants your research gone, and I've just risked my life to save you, so I suggest you don't ask too many questions." Dr. Stone shot her a skeptical look. "And why would someone like you do that?" Nera didn't answer. The truth was, she wasn't sure herself. Her orders had been to eliminate him, but something had shifted within her, something she couldn't yet identify. Her instincts told her that Dr. Stone's research might be worth more than she had been led to believe. And for the first time, her loyalty to the Varan Empire felt fragile, as if the threads of duty were loosening. The enemy ship closed in on them, firing bursts of energy that rocked Nera's vessel. She navigated through the asteroid field with a fierce focus, evading the blasts with deft maneuvers. At last, she initiated a jump into hyperfold, propelling them into a streak of light that tore them away from the asteroid and their pursuers. As the ship stabilized in open space, Nera allowed herself a moment to breathe. She turned to Dr. Stone, who was watching her with a mixture of suspicion and gratitude. "Looks like we're in this together now," she said, her tone resigned yet resolute. Dr. Stone nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of their situation. The Varan Empire had sent one of their best to eliminate him, and now she was his only ally. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, an unlikely alliance forged in the heat of survival. And deep inside, Nera sensed that this mission was far from over. The unlikely alliance. As the stars outside blurred into streaks of light, Neraxion took a moment to steady her breath. She had escaped the clutches of the Varan Empire's orders, but in doing so, she had entered uncharted territory. Dr. Eli Stone sat across from her, tension crackling in the air between them. Their fates were now intertwined in a way neither had anticipated. "Where are we headed?" Eli asked, his voice steady despite the chaos they had just escaped. He clutched the device he had rescued from the research facility tightly, as if it were a vital lifeline. Nera glanced at the navigational display, her fingers dancing over the controls. "We need to get somewhere safe, somewhere the Empire can't find us," she replied, her mind racing. "I know a place, a hidden base on the fringe of the perihelion cluster. It's not marked on any Imperial charts." Eli raised an eyebrow, the skepticism evident on his face. "And how do I know I can trust you? You were sent to kill me." Her gaze met his, and for a moment she hesitated. "You're right, I was. But things have changed. The Varan Empire is not what it seems. You have to understand, I've spent my life following orders, never questioning them. But when I saw you fighting for your work, I realized something important. You're not just a threat, you might be the key to something greater. Eli processed her words, uncertainty flickering in his blue eyes. Why do you care about my work? The Empire has made it clear they want to eliminate anyone who poses a threat. What's in it for you? Nira sighed, leaning back in her seat. I'm tired of being a weapon, Ellie. I want to make my own choices. I want to know that my skills can be used for something other than murder. The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and raw. She had never voiced her doubts, and the revelation felt like a weight lifted from her shoulders. Eli considered her for a moment, studying the assassin with a mix of curiosity and caution. All right, I'll take you at your word for now. But if you want to keep me alive, you need to understand what I'm fighting for. My research isn't just theory. It could change the galaxy. If I'm captured or killed, all of it dies with me. Then let's make sure that doesn't happen, Naira replied, her resolve hardening. We'll figure out how to protect your research together. As they flew through the darkness, Naira plotted a course toward the perihelion cluster, a region known for its swirling nebulae and hidden pirate hideouts. It was a treacherous area, but it offered the anonymity they needed. The ship's engines hummed steadily as they entered the cluster, the vibrant colors of space swirling around them. Hours passed, filled with tension and uncertainty. Nira focused on piloting, while Eli examined the data on his device, occasionally glancing up at her. Despite their stark differences, an unspoken bond began to form, a tentative alliance born out of necessity. As they traveled deeper into the cluster, Nira couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Do you think they'll come after us? Ellie asked suddenly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Nira's brow furrowed as she analyzed the sensors. I don't know. The Empire may have lost track of us for now, but they're relentless. If they catch a whiff of your location, they'll send every ship in their fleet. Then we need to move quickly, he said, determination flickering in his gaze. I can help you disable their tracking systems. Nira nodded, intrigued by his offer. What do you need from me? Just a secure terminal and some time. We'll need to mask our signatures, confuse their tracking systems, he explained, his mind racing with ideas. With the right modifications, we can make it almost impossible for them to pinpoint our location. Oh right, Nira agreed. But first, we need to find a safe place to land. After navigating through the cluster's tumultuous paths, they finally approached an uncharted planet, its surface covered with dense jungles and towering mountains. Nira expertly landed the ship within a secluded cove, hidden from prying eyes. As they disembarked, the lush green of the planet greeted them with an almost overwhelming vibrancy. Welcome to Verdant Prime, Nira said, surveying the landscape with a cautious eye. It's a desolate paradise, perfect for hiding out. Eli stepped out, taking in the alien flora and fauna. It's beautiful, he remarked, a sense of wonder creeping into his voice. Don't let it fool you, Nira warned, scanning the area. There are plenty of predators here, both animal and otherwise. Stay alert. Once they secured their ship, Eli set up a makeshift command center inside the vessel, opening his device and beginning to transfer data. Nira watched as he worked, impressed by his proficiency. He typed commands quickly, the screen filled with lines of code that made her head spin. Tell me what you need, she said, leaning over his shoulder. I need to access the ship's mainframe, he replied, glancing up at her. If I can tap into the internal systems, I can mask our signatures and create a ghost profile for us. Nira nodded and assisted him in navigating the ship's interface, her fingers flying over the keys as she followed his instructions. They worked in tandem, a fluid exchange of ideas and skills that surprised them both. For the first time in her life, Nira felt like she was part of something bigger than her own existence, a partnership formed out of shared goals. As they worked late into the night, Eli began explaining his research. The potential for interdimensional folding is incredible, he said, his eyes lighting up. Imagine being able to connect worlds that are light years apart. It could eliminate the need for traditional travel and revolutionize trade and communication. But it's not just about transportation. It's about understanding the fabric of our universe. Nora listened intently, realizing that his passion for his work mirrored her own dedication to her craft. "But why did the Empire want you dead?" she asked. "Is it just fear of your discoveries?" "Fear and control," he replied, his expression turning serious. "My research could disrupt the power dynamics in the galaxy. The Empire thrives on dominance, and I'm seen as a threat to that order. If I succeed, it could give others the power to challenge them. They can't allow that." The weight of his words settled heavily in the air. Nera understood the stakes now, not just for Eli, but for countless others who might benefit from his work. "So we need to protect you and your research at all costs," she concluded, her voice firm. "Exactly," Eli said, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. "If we can outsmart the Empire, we can turn the tide. We'll need allies and a plan. I have contacts in the Outer Rim who might help us, but first, we need to stay hidden." Nera nodded, determination solidifying in her chest. "Let's finish the modifications and then set a course for the Outer Rim. We'll need to move quickly before they catch up." With newfound purpose, they continued their work late into the night, the sound of their fingers on the console a rhythm of shared resolve. Nera felt a shift within her, a growing sense of belonging and hope. She was no longer just a weapon, she was part of something larger, fighting not only for her life, but for the future of a galaxy that had long been shrouded in darkness. As dawn broke on Verdant Prime, the first rays of light filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows across the ground. Nera stepped outside, breathing in the rich sense of the alien world, feeling the energy of possibility coursing through her veins. She turned back to the ship, a sense of camaraderie growing between her and Eli. Together, they would fight against the shadows of the past and forge a new path into the future, a future where they could rewrite the narrative of their lives, defy the odds, and challenge the very empire that sought to control them. And with that determination, the next chapter of their journey began. Revelations and resolve. Days passed on Verdant Prime, the planet's dense jungles and crystal-clear rivers providing an unlikely sanctuary for Nerexion and Dr. Eli Stone. Though secluded, their stay was anything but tranquil. As they continued to work, tensions simmered beneath the surface. The alliance, born of necessity, began to transform into something more complex, a mutual respect and understanding that unsettled them both. Naira's purpose as an assassin had been unquestionable until now, but Ellie's vision of the galaxy, a place where people were free to explore, connect, and grow without the Empire's oppressive control, challenged everything she had been raised to believe. And yet, despite her doubts, she found herself aligning with him, her resolve hardening. One evening, as they sat beside a crackling fire near the ship, Nera broke the silence. "You mentioned allies," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Who exactly are these people? Why do you trust them?" Eli leaned back, his gaze thoughtful as he poked at the fire. "They're not people I trust completely, but they share a common interest. We're part of an underground movement called the Starbound Collective, a network of scientists, engineers, and free thinkers across the galaxy who believe in the right to knowledge and progress, free from the Empire's grip." Nora listened, her curiosity piqued. She'd had heard whispers of such groups before, but the Empire had always dismissed them as inconsequential. To her surprise, Eli seemed unconvinced. "The collective is fractured," he admitted. "Some members are reckless, more focused on rebellion than real change. But there are those who genuinely want to see the galaxy improve. I was one of them, until the Empire tried to silence me." A chill ran through Nera. "And you think they'll help us? They might see me as the enemy." "Maybe," Eli said, meeting her gaze. "But if I can show them that we're working together, they'll understand. Besides, you're the only reason I'm still alive. I trust you, Nara." The words lingered between them, unspoken emotions swirling. Trust was a foreign concept to Nira, a luxury she had never needed in her world of rigid discipline and solitary missions. But here, isolated from the galaxy's chaos, she found herself wanting to believe in his vision. The next morning, they packed up their makeshift camp and boarded the ship. With their modifications complete, they were effectively invisible to the Empire's trackers, a small victory that gave them a sense of hope. Nira set the coordinates for the collective's base, located on a distant moon in the outer rim. As they traveled through hyperspace, Eli continued to brief Nira on the collective. Their leader is a man named Rylan Aris. He's a former Imperial scientist who defected years ago. He's brilliant, but he can be skeptical, especially when it comes to outsiders. Sounds like we'll get along well, Nira remarked dryly, earning a smirk from Ailey. The journey was long, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the ship's engines. Nira used the time to sharpen her instincts, practicing with her blades and running simulations in her mind. But despite her focus, her thoughts drifted back to Ailey. His dedication and unyielding belief in his mission stirred something within her that she struggled to define. Finally, after days in transit, they approached the moon where the collective had set up their hidden outpost. As they neared the atmosphere, the ship's sensors pinged with a message. A static-laced voice crackled through the speakers. "Identify yourself or be fired upon. This is a restricted zone." Eli stepped forward, activating the ship's comm system. "This is Dr. Eli Stone. I need to speak with Rylan Aris. Tell him it's urgent." A tense silence followed, and Nira's hand drifted to her weapon instinctively. Then, after a moment, the voice returned, slightly more accommodating. "Dr. Stone, proceed to the designated coordinates. We'll be expecting you." As they landed in a secluded clearing near the collective's base, a group of armed guards awaited them. Nira and Ely disembarked, and the guards led them into the heart of the compound. The base was a patchwork of high-tech equipment and scavenged materials, a testament to the collective's resourcefulness. They were escorted into a large control room, where Rylan Aris awaited them. A tall, lean man with sharp features and piercing grey eyes, Rylan exuded an air of intensity. His gaze flicked to Nira, suspicion evident in his expression. "Ailey," Rylan greeted, his voice clipped. "You brought company." "This is Nira," Eli replied, his tone steady. "She saved my life, Rylan. We wouldn't be here without her." Rylan's gaze remained fixed on Nira. "An Imperial assassin saving one of our own. Forgive me if I find that hard to believe." Nira met his gaze, unfazed. "Believe what you want. I didn't come here to seek your approval." Eli stepped between them, his voice firm. "Rylan, we don't have time for this. The Empire is hunting us down. They tried to destroy my research, and they'll come for anyone who's helping me. We need the collective's support." Rylan folded his arms, his skepticism softening slightly. "And what do you need from us?" "Resources, sanctuary, and access to a secure network," Eli replied. "With the right technology, we can protect the research, even if we're found, but we can't do it alone." After a long, scrutinizing look, Rylan nodded. "Fine, but she's your responsibility, Eli. If anything goes wrong, I'll hold you accountable." With that, Rylan turned and walked away, leaving them to settle in. Over the next several days, Nira and Ely integrated themselves into the collective's operations. Nira kept mostly to herself, her presence a point of tension among the members who saw her as a potential threat. But she threw herself into training sessions, honing her skills while keeping a watchful eye on the collective's dynamics. Ely, meanwhile, poured his energy into safeguarding his research. With the collective's advanced encryption systems, they began to create backups, distributing copies across hidden networks in case the Empire ever tracked them down. He worked tirelessly, often skipping meals and losing himself in data. Nira found herself stepping in, reminding him to take breaks, a quiet camaraderie forming as they pushed through the days. Then, one evening, As Nira patrolled the perimeter, she noticed a figure watching her from the shadows. It was a young woman with intense green eyes and a defiant stance. She stepped forward, her gaze challenging. "You're Nira, aren't you?" the woman asked, her voice a mix of awe and suspicion. Nora nodded. "Who are you?" "I'm Leah," she replied, "one of the collective's scouts. I heard stories about you, about how you were the Empire's finest assassin. Why are you here? Why would someone like you turn against the Empire?" Nira hesitated, struggling to find the right words. "Because sometimes the mission isn't what you thought it was," she said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "I followed orders my entire life, but that doesn't mean I can't see when something's wrong. Ellie's work, what he's trying to achieve, it's worth protecting, even if it means going against everything I was taught." Leah studied her, something softening in her expression. "I hope you're right. We could use someone like you, if you're truly with us." As Leah walked away, Nera felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps for the first time, she was no longer just a weapon, but a person with purpose and choice. The collective was wary of her, but she understood their fear. She had been that fear once, a shadow in the night, an instrument of death. Now she was something else, and the change both frightened and exhilarated her. In the days that followed, Naira's presence became more accepted. She even began training with the collective's scouts, teaching them stealth tactics and combat strategies. Her bond with Ellie deepened, their conversations ranging from tactical planning to moments of quiet reflection. They were partners now, their goals entwined, their hopes shared. Then, one morning, an alarm sounded throughout the base. Nira's heart raced as she grabbed her weapon, sprinting to the control room where Eli and Relan were already huddled around the main display. "The Empire's fleet," Relan said, his voice tense. "They found us." Eli turned to Nira, his expression resolute. "We've got to protect the data at all costs. If they capture it, everything we've worked for will be lost." Nira nodded, her mind already calculating. "Then we fight," she said, her voice steady. "We'll give them a reason to fear us." As the collective mobilized, preparing for the impending attack, Nera felt a surge of fierce loyalty and resolve. This was no longer just a mission. It was a fight for freedom, for change, for a galaxy unshackled by tyranny. And she was ready to face it, no matter the cost. The battle for survival. The hum of the collective's command center was tense and focused. Naira, Ellie, and Relan Aris stood shoulder to shoulder, gazing at the tactical display. Outside, the metallic hum of weaponry and the low murmur of collective members preparing for battle filled the air. The Empire's ships were descending through Verdant Prime's atmosphere, their shadows cast ominously across the jungle below. The Empire's forces were relentless, and it was clear they intended to crush any opposition, especially one that harbored their most wanted scientist. Rillan's face was grim as he studied the display. "We're outnumbered, and they've brought an entire fleet. We might have the advantage of terrain, but that won't last once they land. If they reach the command center, it's over." Eli nodded, determination sparking in his eyes. "We can't let them get near the core. The data nodes are our lifelines. I've distributed backups to our allies across the galaxy, but if the primary source falls into their hands, everything we've done here will be worthless." Nara's gaze was cold and calculating. "Then we make sure they never reach it. We use every advantage we have: terrain, surprise, guerrilla tactics. This isn't just a base, it's our stronghold. We turn it into a trap." Her hand tightened on her blade, a glint of steely resolve in her eyes. "I'll lead a team to intercept their ground forces, keep them out of the base and slow them down." Rylan hesitated. "That's risky. The Imperial soldiers are heavily armed, and they know how to deal with resistance." Nira shot him a sharp look. "Good, so do I." There was a moment of silence, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Rylan nodded, his respect for Nira clear despite his initial distrust. "All right, take who you need and get moving." Eli stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Be careful, Naira. We can't do this without you." Naira gave a small, reassuring nod. "I'll come back. Count on it." Leaving the command center, Naira quickly assembled a team of the collective's best scouts and combat-trained members. Leah, the young scout she had met earlier, was among them, her eyes burning with fierce determination. Together, they moved through the dense jungle, positioning themselves along the anticipated path of the Imperial forces. The ground was damp beneath their boots, and the air was thick with the scent of the jungle, every sound amplified in the silence before the storm. As they waited, Naira went over the plan one last time with her team. Stay low, stay hidden, and don't engage unless necessary. Our goal is to disrupt, not to destroy. Slow them down, divide their forces, and lead them into ambush points. We're not looking for a stand-up fight. Hit and run. Her team nodded, their faces set in grim focus. They knew the stakes, and they trusted Naira, who had become a beacon of strength among them. In the short time she had spent with the collective, her expertise and fearlessness had earned her their respect, even if some still regarded her with caution. Finally, the sound of marching feet reached them, distant but distinct. Through the thick underbrush, Naira spotted the glint of Imperial armor as soldiers advanced, their weapons gleaming ominously. She signaled for her team to take their positions, spreading out across the jungle. They moved silently, blending into the dense foliage like shadows. As the Imperial forces passed, Naira gave a subtle hand signal, and Leah, positioned just ahead, triggered a trap they had set earlier. A series of explosive charges detonated, scattering debris and catching several soldiers off guard. Chaos erupted as the Imperial formation broke, their troops scrambling to reorganize. In the confusion, Naira and her team launched a surprise attack, striking swiftly before disappearing back into the jungle. They struck from all sides, moving with the agility of predators. Each skirmish was calculated, each blow designed to sow disorder and fear among the Imperials. Naira moved with lethal grace, her blade flashing as she took down soldiers, her focus razor-sharp. Her training as an assassin had never been more valuable, and for the first time, she felt as though she was fighting for something that truly mattered. The Imperial forces tried to regroup, but the jungle terrain worked against them, slowing their progress. Naira and her team continued their relentless assault, each ambush weakening the enemy's resolve. Leah proved to be a formidable ally, coordinating her attacks with Naira's, the two moving as if they had fought side by side for years. After hours of brutal skirmishes, the Imperial forces managed to break through the collective's initial line of defense, though at great cost. They regrouped in a clearing, setting up a fortified position. Naira and her team pulled back, regrouping to reassess their strategy. She could see the exhaustion in their faces, the toll the battle was taking on them. But she also saw the fire in their eyes, the determination to protect what they had fought for. "We've slowed them down, but they're adapting," Naira said, her voice low and steady. "They'll be expecting another ambush. We need to draw them out into open ground where they're vulnerable." One of the scouts, a tall, wiry man named Tarek, spoke up. "There's an old mining shaft nearby. It's narrow and treacherous. If we lead them there, they'll have no room to maneuver." Naira nodded, a plan forming in her mind. "Perfect. We'll stage a false retreat, draw them into the shaft, and trap them inside. Once they're in, we can use explosives to seal the entrance. They'll be forced to retreat or face being buried alive." They quickly relayed the plan and began setting up. Naira and her team initiated another round of skirmishes, feigning weakness and gradually pulling back toward the mine. The Imperial forces, sensing an opportunity, pursued aggressively, unaware of the trap being laid for them. As they reached the entrance of the mining shaft, Naira's team held their ground, luring the Imperial soldiers deeper into the narrow passage. The walls of the shaft were rough and crumbling, the perfect setting for an ambush. Naira signaled to Tarek, who activated the charges placed along the walls. Explosions echoed through the shaft as rocks tumbled down, sealing the entrance and trapping a significant portion of the Imperial forces inside. The collective members watched from a distance as the Imperials struggled, their shouts and the sound of blaster fire reverberating within the shaft. For a moment, victory felt within reach. But as they regrouped, Nara's communicator crackled with an urgent message from Eli. His voice was strained, the tension palpable. "Nara, we've detected another wave of ships entering Verdant Prime's atmosphere. This is a full-scale assault. They're sending reinforcements, and they'll be here any moment." Nara's heart sank, though she kept her expression calm for the sake of her team. They had fought hard, but with reinforcements on the way, the odds were turning against them. She motioned for her team to fall back, leading them through the jungle and back toward the command center. As they arrived, Nara was greeted by a scene of organized chaos. The collective was bracing for a final defense, members scrambling to secure the core data nodes and fortify the center. Eli was at the heart of the action, his face tense but focused. Rylan was coordinating with the collective's defense teams, his voice calm despite the looming threat. Nora approached Eli, her voice steady. "What's the plan? We're running out of time." Eli looked at her, his face lined with determination. "We can't let them reach the command center. If they capture the core, everything we've done will be for nothing. I've initiated a purge sequence with the data, but it'll take time to complete. We need to hold them off until then." "Understood," Naira replied, gripping her blade tightly. "We'll buy you as much time as we can." Roland approached, his expression fierce. "We've reinforced the perimeter, but it won't be enough. We need a last line of defense, something that will keep them out at all costs." Nura's mind raced, searching for a solution. Then an idea struck her. "I'll set up a perimeter around the core room itself. If they break through, we make that the final stand. It'll be close quarters combat, but it's our best shot." Roland nodded, determination in his eyes. "Do it." As Naira and her team took their positions around the core room, the sound of Imperial ships descending grew louder. The collective members braced themselves, weapons at the ready, their faces a mixture of fear and resolve. Eli worked furiously on the data purge, every second feeling like an eternity. Then the final assault began. Imperial soldiers stormed the base, blasting through barricades and forcing their way deeper. Nura fought with the ferocity of a cornered predator, every move precise and lethal. Her team held their ground, each of them fighting with a desperate courage born of conviction. The hours dragged on, the battle raging with unrelenting intensity. Nura felt the weight of exhaustion, but she refused to yield, her focus sharpened by the knowledge that Eli and the future of the collective depended on their success. Finally, as the first light of dawn crept through the shattered walls, the last of the Imperial forces retreated, their numbers decimated. Nura's team had held the line, their determination unwavering. They had defended the core, and with Ellie's purge sequence complete, the Empire had lost any chance of accessing the collective's data. Nura stood in the quiet aftermath, her heart pounding as she surveyed the scene. They had won a hard-fought victory, but the cost had been high. She knew this was only the beginning, a single battle in a much larger war. But as she looked around at the survivors, each of them standing with fierce pride, despite their wounds, she felt a surge of hope. They had defied the Empire, fought for freedom, and protected a future worth believing in. And for the first time, Nara knew that she was no longer an assassin bound by duty. She was a warrior with purpose, a fighter for a cause greater than herself. And she was ready to see it through, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. The price of defiance. In the days following the battle, the collective's base was a hive of activity. Despite their victory over the Imperial forces, the atmosphere was tinged with tension and exhaustion. Survivors tended to their wounds, rebuilt what they could, and fortified the base further, knowing the Empire would not accept their defeat quietly. Nerexion felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders as she moved through the camp, watching those she had come to respect work tirelessly to secure their fragile peace. Eli Stone was restless, his gaze never leaving his equipment as he worked to re-establish communication with the wider collective network. The data purge had been successful, but the Empire was relentless, and it was only a matter of time before they returned in greater numbers. One evening, as the fiery light of Verdant Prime's sun dipped below the horizon, casting the jungle in a deep amber glow, Nera found Eli sitting by himself in a small, secluded alcove outside the main base. His usual intensity was softened, his expression one of deep contemplation. Nera approached, her presence quiet yet unyielding. "We survived, but they'll come back," she said, her voice steady. "You know that, don't you?" Eli nodded, his eyes still on the distant horizon. "Yes, the Empire doesn't forgive or forget, but we have something they don't: unity. The collective stands for something greater than power. We've all chosen to be here, to fight for a future where knowledge isn't shackled by fear." Nura settled down beside him, her gaze thoughtful. "I never thought I'd see the Empire as anything but invincible, but seeing what you and the others have built here, it's changed me. I used to think strength came from control and fear, but now I understand that real strength is in choice, in standing together." Eli looked at her, a spark of hope igniting in his tired eyes. "Then let's make sure the Empire learns that too, but we'll need more than just courage. We need allies, resources, and a plan that can strike at the heart of their control." Nara considered his words carefully. The Empire's power spanned entire star systems, its influence woven into every aspect of life across the galaxy. But they had weaknesses too: overconfidence, a reliance on fear, and a lack of understanding of the spirit that burned within those they oppressed. "We'll need to reach out to the collective's other cells," she said. "If we can unite them, we might stand a chance. The Empire is vast, but it's stretched thin. If we coordinate with the other cells, we can strike in a way they won't expect." Ellie's expression brightened with determination. "Roland has contacts who can arrange safe passage for us to the central node of the collective. It's hidden in an asteroid field near the fringe territories. From there, we can reach the collective's leaders, share what we've learned, and start building a strategy." Just then, Rylan appeared, his tall figure silhouetted against the fading light. He nodded to Nera and Ely, his usual guarded demeanor softened by a sense of newfound respect. "I've made arrangements," he said. "We can leave at first light. The journey won't be easy, but the central node is the safest place for regrouping. We'll get there, and we'll make our stand." Early the next morning, they departed Verdant Prime under the cover of dawn, slipping into the dense cover of the asteroid belt that surrounded the outer reaches of the galaxy. Nura piloted their ship with precision, navigating through the narrow, twisting paths of the asteroid field. She had grown accustomed to working alongside Ailey, their movements and decisions aligning seamlessly as they pressed forward. The journey was perilous. Each passage through the asteroid field was filled with floating debris, abandoned wrecks of ships, and scattered remnants of civilizations that had once thrived but had long since fallen to ruin. It was a haunting reminder of the galaxy's violent history, of the Empire's ruthless ambition that had left entire worlds shattered and abandoned. Finally, after days of navigating the treacherous maze, they reached the central node, a hidden base carved into the heart of a massive asteroid. Unlike Verdant Prime, the central node was fortified, heavily defended with layers of security that protected it from both Imperial detection and pirate raids. As they approached, a series of encrypted messages flashed across their console, each one verifying their identity before granting them access to the inner sanctum. Once inside, they were greeted by a group of collective leaders, each one a seasoned operative or strategist who had dedicated their life to resisting the Empire's tyranny. Among them was Nera Lorne, a former Imperial officer who had defected after witnessing the Empire's atrocities. She was an imposing figure, her face lined with the scars of countless battles, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Mira assessed Nera with an appraising look. "So, you're the Empire's ghost who decided to change sides. I've heard stories about you, Nera Xian." Nera met her gaze without flinching. "I didn't come here to prove myself. I came to help. The Empire is hunting us down, and we need to fight back." Mira's expression softened slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Good. We need people who can think on their feet. The Empire's grip is tightening, and if we're to break free, we'll need every advantage we can get." Over the next several days, Nera, Eli, and the other leaders worked tirelessly, poring over star maps, coordinating resources, and crafting a plan that would strike at the Empire's soft points. They discussed sabotage, intelligence gathering, and guerrilla tactics that would wear down the Empire's forces while avoiding direct confrontation. Eli was instrumental in these discussions, his knowledge of technology and interstellar networks invaluable to their strategy. His work on quantum hyperfield technology was a core piece of their plan. With the collective's resources, they could potentially destabilize the Empire's communication networks, creating chaos and confusion that would buy them time to rally more allies. Late one evening, as Nera and Eli were finalizing the tactical plans, an encrypted message flashed across the main console. It was a distress signal from a nearby system. A small settlement was under siege by the Empire, its inhabitants resisting forced evacuation orders. The settlement was home to a large population of refugees, people who had fled the Empire's reach only to find it creeping back into their lives. Ellie's face darkened as he read the message. "They're wiping out entire communities, trying to root out any trace of rebellion. If we ignore this, they'll send a message to anyone who dares resist." Nara's gaze turned steely. "Then we answer that message. We'll show the Empire that they're not invincible." They relayed the situation to Mira, who quickly agreed to send a strike team. Within hours, Nera, Eli, and a group of collective operatives were en route to the settlement, their mission clear: defend the people and push back the Empire's forces. As they dropped out of hyperspace above the settlement, they were greeted by a grim scene. Imperial ships loomed over the settlement's fragile defenses, their weapons trained on the makeshift barricades that the locals had erected in a desperate attempt to hold the line. Nura's heart hardened as she surveyed the battlefield below. She had been on the Empire's side in countless skirmishes like this, watching as civilians were crushed beneath the weight of Imperial dominance. Now, she was determined to be the force standing in their way. Naira led the assault, her team descending upon the Imperial troops with ruthless precision. The collective's operatives struck from multiple directions, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. Nira moved like a shadow through the chaos, her blade flashing as she took down soldiers with lethal efficiency. She felt a sense of purpose with each strike, a fire igniting within her as she fought not for orders, but for something she truly believed in. Eli worked alongside the settlement's technicians, rerouting power to boost their shields and establishing a secure line of communication to coordinate the defense. His hands flew over the controls, his focus unwavering as he orchestrated the settlement's resistance. The battle raged on for hours, each side pushing the other to their limits. Nira's team sustained losses, but they held their ground, their determination unyielding. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn in their favor, the Imperial forces faltering as the collective's guerrilla tactics took their toll. Finally, as the first light of dawn crested over the horizon, the remaining Imperial troops retreated, their ships disappearing into the sky. The settlement was battered, its people weary, but they had survived. Cheers erupted from the crowd as the realization of their victory set in, a sense of hope lighting their faces. Nira stood amidst the crowd, her gaze distant yet resolute. She knew that this victory, hard-won though it was only a small part of a much larger struggle. The Empire would return, and next time, they would bring even greater force. But as she looked around at the faces of the people she had fought to protect, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Empire's strength lay in its ability to inspire fear, to make people believe that resistance was futile. But as long as there were those willing to stand and fight, the Empire's power would never be absolute. Later, as they prepared to return to the central node, Ely found her standing alone, her gaze fixed on the horizon. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression one of quiet pride. "You did it, Naira. You showed them that they're not alone." Naira turned to him, a faint smile touching her lips. "No, Eli, we did it, and this is only the beginning." With a final look at the liberated settlement, they boarded their ship, ready to return to the heart of the resistance and prepare for the battles yet to come. Naira knew that her journey was far from over, that the fight for freedom was just beginning. But for the first time, she felt certain that they would prevail. The Empire had awakened a force it couldn't contain, a force driven not by orders or duty, but by the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to dream of a better galaxy. And she would fight to her last breath to make that dream a reality.